for your participation tonight. I'm Lauren Willey. I'm the cultural attaché here at the U.S. Embassy, where we are always very appreciative of all of the engagement with our partners here in the UAE on education. And tonight we're here to talk about how to encourage women to pursue STEM education and STEM careers. So I'll really look forward to the discussion that Aisha is going to have with the audience this evening. The U.S. recognizes how important it is to encourage women to pursue STEM education, and especially to economic development and for our social goals. And we're really excited as the embassy to welcome the UAE's education leaders to tonight's conversation from institutions like the Ministry of Education, the United Arab Emirates University, and the Higher Colleges of Technology, among others. We'll really appreciate this exchange of ideas with Aisha, and we really appreciate your presence here tonight. Aisha is not only a former rocket scientist from NASA, but she is now the founder and CEO of a company called STEM Board that is one of the fastest growing companies in the United States and has also been involved in a number of other entrepreneurial initiatives. We're so lucky to have her with us tonight to talk about how to encourage women to pursue STEM fields, why that's so important to economic development. And given that women really do face some stereotypes and challenges when it comes to pursuing STEM education and STEM careers, she is here to offer us some food for thought when it comes to overcoming those challenges. So Aisha, thank you so much for being here tonight. Before I pass the word over to you, I want to encourage everybody to start putting your questions for Aisha in the chat box now, and I'll be monitoring that chat box so that I can raise your questions to her. And you're also, of course, welcome to ask the question yourself. So if you want to, please just indicate that. And then also, please note that this session offers closed captioning, so you can activate that at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass the word over to you, Aisha. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lauren. I would like to begin by thanking the U.S. Mission in the United Arab Emirates, as well as the United States Department, for the opportunity to address you all here today. And thank you to the educational leaders in the UAE for spending your evening with me. There's a picture here that I want to show you. And while I understand it may not be the best quality, as we didn't take as many pictures a decade ago as we do now, it tells a really important story. On the left side is my grandmother. In the middle is myself. And on the right side is my mother. Some may look at this and think that it's the picture of a family, which is true, but it's more than that. The picture that you're seeing is the progression of education in my family. And this education came through empowerment, and it came through some of the things that we're going to talk about here today. When I talk about STEM, when I talk about technology, when I talk about my journey, sometimes I find that these concepts can seem abstract, but they're very personal because the investments that we make in women, the partnerships that we cultivate with men, and the technology and the benefits that come from those initiatives directly benefit and better families and better communities and more opportunity for both genders. My grandmother here, she barely had an 8th grade education. When she left South Carolina and she went to New York, and she had my mom. My mom, who's on the right side, managed to complete her high school degree and she entered into college, but she met my father and completed a 2-year degree in college, had us, and well, I'm very happy that she did because I'm here speaking with you today. In the middle, this picture, this is me. This is me completing my master's degree in aerospace engineering, the first woman in my family to obtain a technical degree, the first woman in my family to complete a master's degree from one of the best aerospace schools in the country, and without having any prior lineage in doing so. My father, who was here, who is not pictured in this shot, received his engineering degree at 40 years old. And I can remember on this day, he came to me and he said to me, Aisha, I never thought I would see a day when you and I would have the same level of education. And as a result, he went back and he completed a master's degree in electrical engineering and entered a PhD program after that graduation. So let's talk about, in high level terms, why is empowering women important? And one of the things you're going to hear from me today is not only about empowering women, but the partnership between women and men that allow that to happen. And the first is that investing in women's economic empowerment not only creates a direct path towards eradicating poverty, it also creates economic growth potential. In the picture I showed you, you saw the progression in education in my family, but you also saw the progression of wealth and opportunity. You saw someone who was able to grow up and not only make a living wage, but a wage that allowed her to make investments into her family and to become a property owner, and eventually found a business that could invest into my community and my country. The second thing is that women make enormous contributions in their families. Why would that not be the same with their finances if they are empowered to do the same? What we find is that whether women are working in businesses or on farms, as entrepreneurs or as employees who are working in the home, they tend to take this income and they invest in those around them, whether it be their mothers, whether it be their fathers, whether it be their children. Some of the work is paid, some of the work is unpaid. They invest in their time, they invest in their finances. And all of these are benefits that the community receives as a byproduct of investing in women. And furthermore, to that point and to my story, part of what I did after leaving college and starting upon the career path as an engineer, as I started to look around me and to say, why are there not more women in engineering? Why are there not more minorities? And I need to find a way to talk about this. And so what you're looking at today is the embodiment of a dream and a promise I made to myself all those many years ago when I realized how much I could contribute with my technical education to not only the world, but to the globe. So what are some of the ways that we can talk about increasing visibility in STEM? And I will tell you, this is a teaser slide because I'm fully expecting that we're going to have quite a discussion later on in the program when I toss it over to Lauren for some more Q&A. But here are some of the things that I would like for you to think about as we talk about my journey, not only in tech, but as an entrepreneur. One of the things that I had access to early on was workforce development opportunities. And when we talk about this workforce development, one of the things I realized was that because I came from a different background, I thought differently. And the way that I thought could add to the ways that people could think to solve problems. And so I'll say that again. I was often in rooms with individuals who thought about problems a certain way. And my perspective from my background of not having as much as others, from being a minority female, and entering into a classic male environment as an aerospace engineer at NASA allowed for me to see the problem in a different way. Well, this addition to the problem-solving group allowed for my male counterparts to come up with new perspectives and allowed all of us to innovate together. And this happened because they were very welcoming of my entry. And I'll never forget, as a junior engineer, I started working at NASA in Silicon Valley. It's the second oldest NASA facility. It was selected over 80 years ago by Charles Lindbergh. And as you can imagine, I was one of a few, as opposed to one of many. The director of engineering came to my building to introduce me for my very first talk in front of my colleagues. And I'll never forget that day because he did something that I would grow to appreciate years after the fact. He set the expectation for respect. He leveraged his power, he leveraged his influence to let other people know that I was welcomed there and my ideas were important. And from that day on, I also made a pledge that I would do my best to live up to that expectation because he made it so that the workplace could see me as someone who should be received and whose ideas should be elevated and listened to. And that gets to my second bullet on environment. As we go through our talk today, I would encourage you to think about your environment. Is it welcoming to those who may be new entrants? Are you reaching out? Are you encouraging people to join you? Are you offering your time? Are you offering your guidance? Some of the most valuable conversations I've had have not been about investment. They have been about mistakes that other people allowed me the benefit to learn from. And so you may be saying, well, I don't know where to start. I'm not sure how to help. I don't know what I can do. Well, I would tell you to start by sharing what it is that you know. You may be surprised how somebody may take something that you learned and turn it into something that they also can learn from. And that gets to the right-hand side, which is more of like the practical elements of entrepreneurship. As we know, women are emerging as entrepreneurs globally. Many women, however, have not established a network in order to benefit from some of these lessons learned the hard way, as I call them. And they may not have access to capital, as well as other individuals that can work with them to help them grow their idea. As we proceed in the conversation, I'll tell you about founding STEMboard and creating Lingo, which is a self-paced coding kit. And I used to think that I had to know everything in order to get started. And what I recognized was I did not need to know everything, but I needed to have the desire to reach out to people who may have the knowledge who could educate me. And all of you here today represent a wealth of innovation, of expertise, of education, and you have that. You can be mentors, you can be sponsors, and you can play a powerful role in making sure that the women of the future feel supported as they pursue investment, guidance, and look to cultivate environments that can lead to innovation. And so with that, I'm going to pause now, and we're going to turn it over to Lauren for some Q&A. Lauren.
Thanks so much, Aisha, for that really wonderful opening. And you raised a lot of really interesting points for discussion today. And I can say myself, my father is an entrepreneur, and when he starts initiatives, it's kind of crazy to me how little he has it figured out. And so that goes to your point about how to start something, you don't have to have it all figured out as long as you're willing to learn from others and how to do that. So that point really resonated with me. So I want to encourage those of you in the audience who have thoughts that you would like to share or any questions that you'd like to raise, to put them in the chat box or raise your hand, and you can ask that to Aisha directly. And until you're ready to ask your questions, I'll ask one question to you, Aisha. So we've all been experiencing this COVID-19 pandemic, and here in the UAE, I think I'm certainly grateful to have been here because the country has really handled the situation as best as possible. But it really forced us or challenged us to reconsider how we operate across all industries. And you designed and launched Lingo, which is a STEM-based home learning home learning coding kit that helps students explore and enhance STEM skills. So I wanted to just have you explain what it was like launching Lingo, and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, one of the things that I observed in the pandemic, which I mean, the loss and the suffering that we saw was immense, but the innovation and the togetherness that I felt from my community, I haven't experienced in quite some time. And when my team and I started looking around and listening to problems that not only were we having, but those around us were having, what we realized was that there were a lot of individuals who were home with their children, who wanted to figure out how to inspire their children. And also, maybe they wanted to have a break so that they could get some other things done, like work. And what we started to do was we boxed up a kit that we used to give away to students who were in low-income communities who did not have access to technology labs in their schools. And these kits allowed the students electronics components where they could tinker and they could build. We recorded videos, we boxed these up, and we started shipping them to nonprofits who were our partners in the previous years. Well, today, I'm proud to tell you that we have now sold nearly 2,000 boxes. Boxes have been delivered to Kuwait, they've been delivered to Lebanon, they've been delivered to Israel. They've been delivered to numbers of countries who are experiencing the same challenge, who would like to not only figure out how to get their students to learn STEM topics at home, but that could align the topics with leading fields in innovation today. Our first lesson focused on building a sensor for a driverless car. And as you and I both know, autonomy, well, it's the future. Exposing students to these concepts early on, before they fully understand all the math, is a great way to get them started, because technology is a language. And that's why I named the box Lingo. Because if you don't know the language, it's very easy to get left behind. Since then, we've expanded and we've added a host of universities. And I'm really excited to be one of many examples of innovation that has come out of this inflection point in human history. We have digitized our globe. We have made it so that almost everything can be delivered to a home. We are more connected now than we've ever been. And I'm excited to not only use this as a way to educate the world, but to help women and students internationally see how they can bring technology to their doorstep and make it work for them.
Oh, sorry about that muting issue. So thank you so much for that really inspiring story about founding Lingo. We do have some questions in the chat box. So thank you so much to Samrin Salim. So sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. But Samrin asks, you talked about the benefits of a welcoming environment. Have you encountered an unwelcoming environment, and what lessons do you have for us that could help us navigate such a situation?
Thank you for the question. It's an excellent one. And I will be the first to tell you, I have and I do continue to encounter unwelcoming environments. But that is why I'm here with you today. I feel that oftentimes people will initially push away what is unfamiliar to them. And it is part of my role to make women in STEM and women in technology more visible and more familiar, so that more women will join in being role models. And when we have that, and when we have more women in the field, I think that the society may be more welcoming. But I also want to try to help people understand that the challenge before us is not just about having women in the field. The challenge before us is about creating economies and countries that are innovative. And in order to do this, we must have both genders at the table in the design process. I'm going to tell you a quick story here, and it is about a bathroom in South Africa. And you may be saying, why? Why are we talking about a bathroom in South Africa? Well, I had the pleasure of going on a speaking tour in South Africa, and I stayed in a new hotel in Pretoria. And I went into the restroom, and one thing that I noticed immediately was that there were no electrical outlets in the bathroom. No electrical outlets in the bathroom. Now, to some of you who are men, you may or may not think that that's strange, but as a female who may need to blow dry her hair, who may need to straighten her hair, or if I had a small child, I may want to cut his hair, I immediately thought about the design process and who was part of the decisions that became the final drawings for this room. And as I started looking around the room, I saw things that I, as a woman, may have contributed to the design process that could have made the room more appealing to many as opposed to a few. And so I want to kind of get away from talking about the introduction of women as having, just a gender in the room. It's about a diversity of thought. It's about creating better products. It's about having things that meet the needs of many as opposed to few. And if you look at the literature, and Harvard Business School has studied this quite a bit, what they've found is that most companies who incorporate women and non-traditional viewpoints into the decision-making process have companies that increase the revenue the next year because they're capturing greater market share, because they're accessing demographics that they previously may not have been as attractive to. And so the conversation that we're having today is a sophisticated one. It's not only about creating these environments and also encouraging women to go to places where they may not initially feel welcome, understanding that eventually the environment will become welcoming and cultures tend to change for the better over time, but also allowing industries to look at how can we, as not only a globe, but as a country, as people within the UAE, create an innovative economy that benefits from having non-traditional individuals participate in the design process.
Thanks so much for that, Aisha. And I'm sure that you've also learned how diverse the United Arab Emirates is as a country. I think that it redefines diversity in some ways, and diversity exists here in a way that it just doesn't exist anywhere else on the planet. And so your point is very relevant. And so the question is, how do you create that environment where you can really take advantage of that diversity? So I wanted to share that, and then also give Amal Al-Ghafari the chance to ask her question.
Thank you very much. This is Amal Ghafri from Khalifa University. I'm a professor at the Mechanical Engineering program, and I have a very interesting question, one question to ask you. Actually, what do you think the best way to raise the self-esteem in female in the STEM fields? Usually I have a classroom that have female and male in the same classroom, and usually you feel that female, usually they are not that self-confident to discuss their ideas or to raise a new idea in the classroom. On the other hand, you can see their other colleague, the male, they are just, throw their ideas freely with full self-confidence. So I'm facing this in my career, and I would like to hear from you from the other part of the world. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the excellent question. I will tell you that for many years, I struggled with self-confidence. It wasn't until my third year working as an aerospace engineer that I learned to speak up, and I felt comfortable raising my hand. Some of the things that helped me grow out of that self-awareness and, quite frankly, insecurity were that my colleagues, especially my male colleagues, they took time to say that they felt that my ideas were valid. They applauded when I spoke. They were very welcoming. And so for me, beginning to build self-confidence came through a lot of interaction with my peers and having people around me put me in positions where I could be recognized for my contributions. Because unfortunately, it can take other people to recognize what's in us before we do, because we can often be our own worst critics. And so I may suggest a program where you highlight and elevate some of the contributions that your female students have made to the field, as well as having them work with some of their male students who may also do the same. And if there's any way to highlight this on a university-wide or in the community, I would advise that as well. One of the most life-changing moments for me was when I won my first award for a technical publication I wrote on how to optimize aircraft flight paths for fuel efficiency. Up until that moment, I never thought that I would be an award-winning engineer, let alone an award-winning NASA engineer. But if you were to look at my publications now, that one paper, which started off as a conference paper and it started off in a small conference, ended up becoming a journal article, and it ended up becoming a brick along the path to becoming a public speaker, because believe it or not, I used to be really shy. I didn't want to speak to anybody, and I definitely didn't want to speak about my ideas. But once I started to see that my ideas, my work, and my contributions were not only valuable, but they were valued, that's when I started to put more energy and effort into being expressive and being out there. And as Lauren said today, one of the reasons I was really excited to have this presentation and conversation with the education leaders in the UAE is that your country is a diverse one. You are innovative. You have some of the most remarkable feats of architecture and engineering on the planet. And what better place to have this sort of self-confidence and empowering perspective on having more women take leadership roles in the field.
Thank you for that advice, Aisha. Now I would like to ask a question from Miriam Al-Bahiri. She's asking, what advice would you give qualified female engineers who feel they can do more in their jobs, but are not given the opportunity to do so, even when they ask for that opportunity?
Absolutely. So that was kind of leading me into the next segment of the presentation, where we talk a little bit about representation. I think representation matters, but one of the things that I love to do in my talks is to provide concrete steps and perhaps tools and tricks that people can use moving forward. Before I answer that question, I would like to talk to some of the gentlemen who are here today. Hands down, some of the most influential people in my life have been men. They have been men who recognized that I had potential. They understood that I could be an aerospace engineer. They understood that I could run a company. They understood that I could write papers and that I may have an important role to play in the future of technology, far before I ever saw that in myself, long before I ever thought that I could, back when I was shy. And one word that has gotten a lot of buzz in the global community is sponsorship, right? Sponsorship. And I want to kind of talk a little bit about what that is, because in many ways that can help answer the question that was just asked. How can we identify and elevate individuals who may not have opportunities, although they are asking? And the first thing is, what is a sponsor? For me, I had leadership from the director of engineering when I started at NASA. And he who ran all of engineering took me under his wing, and he made it a point to make sure that my voice was heard and I received the same opportunities as my colleagues. Because sometimes things happen, whether people intend to or not, that may lead to individuals not being included in the decision-making process. And so he, as a person who had a seat at the table, made sure that if there was an opportunity, my name came up and I was at least considered among the candidates for the position or for the role. Many of those of us who are part of this conversation today, you also have the power to do that. And I would encourage you to think about the next time there's an opportunity, the next time someone asks you for your advice, the next time someone asks you for a recommendation, think about all the individuals that you know, both women and men, when you make the recommendation. Another thing that sponsors have the ability to do and typically have is direct exposure to the individual at work and credibility behind closed doors. Early on, I decided that I wanted to not only see my NASA center, but I wanted to see many of the centers that NASA has around the country, because NASA has about 10 centers around the United States, and they all do different things. And when I applied for this program, I went on the campaign. I made sure that everyone in my organization knew that I wanted this opportunity. And I put together my resume, I put together my qualifications, and I circulated it so that when those individuals were making the decision behind closed doors, that I would hope that they would consider me and my qualifications. But I also, in this process, knew that I had the support of the men who worked with me because we talked about the opportunity. I expressed to them that I was interested in the opportunity, and they had seen how hard that I worked for over the last few years in order to position myself so that I could be ready for the opportunity. And so as we think about the question of the lady who was an engineer and is looking for more responsibility, I would say that that is something where her community and those who are around her may be able to step in and assist. I would suggest that she engage not only those who directly work for her, but those who may work in other organizations and ask them, how have you handled this challenge? And is there any advice or recommendation or any support that you can give me as I move forward and I look to develop in my career? And for the women, here's some advice that I've found to be very valuable over the course of my time. Being active in shaping your future is important. One of the number one things that I have enjoyed about my career is being part of professional societies and networks that allow for me to learn from other women in the field, many of whom who may have accomplished some of the things that I'm hoping to accomplish moving forward. And to the question that we were asked earlier, I learned to not be afraid of my ideas. Sometimes when your ideas are not accepted, it may feel as though your idea may not be a good idea, but it may be that your idea may not have come at the right time. I need for all of us to take a moment to say to ourselves every single day that what we have to say matters, and that we not only value ourselves, but that what we have to give to the world is valuable. Part of this is understanding your purpose and embracing it. Early on, I was insecure about wanting to be more than an engineer, about wanting to be a founder and wanting to travel the world, until I realized that I was put on this planet for a purpose. And it is my job to fulfill that purpose. It is my job to be the best. And oftentimes when a door closes, a window opens. And that's sort of the other part, which is you have to be open to where life takes you. There have been many moments in life when I have said to myself, Aisha, I think that you were the right pick for a position that I didn't get, or I think that you should have came in first. But what I realized about all those opportunities in hindsight is I was very happy that I did not get them because they were not the right opportunities for me. The right opportunities are the opportunities that come to you. And had I become a manager, for example, at NASA, I may not have founded a company that ended up on the Inc. 5000 list. Had I decided that I wanted to spend my career building spacecraft, I never would have had the opportunity to build Lingo. And so as we think about some of the challenges that lie before us, and this is for all people that I speak to, I always encourage people to take the things that happen to you in life in context, because you never know when you're being set up for an even bigger success.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a message that resonates within the UAE. Something I often hear repeated is, take the smooth path. And that's, I think, the message that you're sending today. So you referenced in your answer just now, oh, you know what, before I ask that question, I wanna leave a chance for Alia Sadawi to ask her question to you directly. Alia, would you like to ask your question? Okay, maybe it was an accidental hand raise. No problem. Okay, so you referenced, Aisha, your journey in founding Lingo and becoming an entrepreneur. And I just wanted to ask you about what that journey was like. You've inspired, you've been an inspirational speaker around the world, and now you're an engineer and a founder. So I'll finish asking the question, and then Alia, I will go ahead and give you the chance. But can you tell us about your journey to get to where you are today? And then after that, we'll unmute Alia so that she can ask you her question.
Yes, and if you will indulge me, I have a few slides on that. And so I will take you guys really quickly on the journey, and then we can open it up to further Q&A. I never thought I was going to be an engineer. As we started on slide 1, I just wanted to graduate, and I wanted to have a job where I could take care of myself and I could afford to make ends meet. And so I started my aerospace engineering degree with pre-algebra in a community college. And when I took the pre-algebra class, I didn't take it thinking, oh, I'm going to take this and I'm going to take calculus. I took it because it was a prerequisite in order to obtain an associate's degree. And so I came into the engineering field really late in life. It wasn't until I was in Calc 2 and I recognized that I could do this. I think I could do math. And I started to build what became my self-esteem bit by bit. And eventually I got up the courage to say, I'm going to be an engineer. And so I applied to the University of Michigan, which is one of the best aerospace schools in the United States of America. And a funny thing happened, I got in. And through this journey in Michigan, I started to understand the rich history that engineering has had on innovation and on global development and on technologies that take us not only to the furthest reaches of this world, but to beyond. And once I started graduating, right, I finished my undergrad, I entered the master's program, I graduated again, I started to understand that as a NASA engineer, I would be able to not only further the mission, but I could have the opportunity to talk about my love of science and technology internationally. Because as a NASA engineer, I started to find out that the missions that we had as a country were far-reaching. We had programs with other nations. We worked on, parts of the International Space Station that were just far out and amazing things. And so what you're looking at is a brief collage of some of the experiences I had at NASA, but the most important part of this to me was to the question that was asked earlier. All along the way, I was building my ability to be confident. I was learning how to speak. I was learning how to present. And I was also learning that it didn't matter whether I was in the United States, I was in the Caribbean, or I was in Europe. A lot of us were facing the same challenges in terms of not feeling confident in STEM and trying to figure out how to take the next step. And so I decided that I was going to do something that was really, really, really scary. I was going to leave NASA. I was going to leave a career path that was carved for me, and I was going to dedicate my time to doing something that always made me feel uncomfortable. Because it's in the uncomfortable areas that we find the most growth. And when I was trying to kind of figure out, all right, you have left the government. What is it that you want to do? I decided that I wanted to found a company, even though I didn't know how, I didn't have the money, and I didn't have the resources, and I didn't know anybody that owned any companies. So that was that didn't necessarily go over well with my parents, let me tell you. They were not a fan in the beginning. And I was going to figure out how to share what I learned with other people around the world. And this became part of the journey to create Lingo. And so what happened was the first year or so, I was scared. I didn't have the funding. I didn't have a clear mission, and I wasn't able to deliver value to customers because, well, quite frankly, I was trying to figure out what I was doing. But this is no different than when you start a new master's program or you start a new course of study in university. The first couple of years can feel a little bit shaky. But as we started to get into year 3 and year 4, I had a better understanding of what it was that I wanted the company to do. I had developed credibility with my clients. I started to see repeat business, and I started to understand that I had the ability to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. The only thing that stood between me and my goals was fear. And that was it. And once I learned how to manage that fear and how to build confidence, it led to where I am today. So I now lead 3 companies. Stemboard, which has been listed on Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing companies in America. We were in the top half in 2020, which is an engineering firm. We provide engineering professional consulting, which is what I learned to do way back when I became an engineer. We also develop educational content and curriculum because it wasn't good enough for me to just be an engineer. I wanted to teach engineering. I wanted people to understand that your career doesn't have to follow just a straight path. It can be a winding road. You can be an engineer, you can be an educator, you can be in technology, you can talk about global economic development. You can really do all of the things that you want to do as long as you allow yourself permission to just be great and to do those things. And so after Stemboard and after the educational consulting piece, which added to the professional engineering, became Lingo, which was the product version that allowed for me to take all of the things that my company learned and distill them into a box that we could ship internationally. And so to your question, Lauren, this took me 8 years. It was 8 years from when I decided to leave NASA that I finally had the confidence, I had the expertise, I had the access and the resources in order to build a company where I could develop product and bring this message to people around the world. My mission is to help people do it in 4, or to help people do it in 2 by making what it is that I know, as well as the message of self-esteem, self-empowerment, and accomplishing these goals as a group to the world, because I didn't do this alone. This was because I had sponsors, I had male mentors who came in who helped me. I had people who were in my field who decided that they were going to make the videos for these boxes, or they were going to connect me with manufacturers. All of these things came together as a byproduct of the work and of the network that I built over the last few years, and a few well-meaning people along the way.
That's a very, very inspiring journey, Aisha. And it's even more inspiring that you are putting yourself out there to help others follow your path, or follow a path they're forging, but in a faster, but at a faster pace than you experienced. That's so cool. And I think the world is lucky to have people like you doing that kind of work. We're getting some really great questions in the chat box. And so now I'd like to give Alia another chance to ask hers.
Thank you. Good evening, Aisha and Lauren, and the respected audience. My name is Alia. I'm a PhD student in my final year at the American University of Sharjah. My PhD is about blockchain technology, which is the technology behind Bitcoin and Ethereum. This technology is new. 10 years ago, it did not exist. And as a member of Women in Blockchain, as per the latest data, only 6% of blockchain developers are women. My question to Aisha, how an early intervention in an evolving technology could be done in the best way to empower women and to increase their share in a new market and in a new technology field? Bearing in mind that opposite to space engineering, blockchain technology is still evolving, it is still developing. So the type of participating or the participation of women could be different because it could be deeper. So I want to have her insight and her thoughts for women in blockchain to evolve and to have a better share and better participation in such a complicated and new and evolving field of technology. Thank you.
Thank you for the excellent question. And I also want to congratulate you on all of your success thus far. I'm delighted to hear that you are not only a PhD student, but it looks like you're nearing the end of your PhD journey. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
What is it about blockchain that excited you?
Well, blockchain is new, so there are a lot of place for new ideas, for having more input. Like when I was choosing my thesis idea, I had many options. So there is more to add, more to give. And the technology itself, it's very interesting to me because it's a merge of multiple technologies and multiple disciplines. And the third thing is I see a bright future for it.
Mhm.
So three things that made it very interesting to me. That's why I chose that field and I insisted on it. Although I had many professors at the university warning me because this is something really new and evolving, and you will be having a tough DAC members' questions in your defense, but I'm ready for it. I'm defending in a few months.
Just listening to you, I can hear your passion. I can hear your excitement. I can hear that you're ready to defend your thesis. And I'm wondering, have you taken the opportunity to share your story? Have you written a blog? Have you told anybody about your passion for blockchain?
No, I just participated. I'm a member of Women in Blockchain, and no, I haven't thought about it.
May I ask that you consider yourself to be a role model and that maybe you should share your story and your journey? When you asked me about how to get more people to become involved, I'm sitting here listening. I would get involved just by hearing you. I would want to know more because I'm listening to you. You have that power.
The thing is that I feel that with an early intervention of a revolving and evolving and emerging technology, women might have more chances, but they might have also more obstacles. So that's why I was looking for your insight,
Yes,
because the field by itself, it's challenging for both genders,
it
for men
is.
and women. So that's number one. And it's a very difficult technology. That's number two. And
Yes.
number three, being a woman who's looking to prove, like, I feel that we should do it right this time. We have a chance. This is only a 10 years old technology. It's a small baby, which is going to be growing to be a giant. Now we will not let this slip from our hands, we women, just like we did with other fields of technologies and fields of life.
I agree with you, but I think what I would like for you to think about is who better than you? Because all of the things that you're communicating today are things that I encountered in my field, but I was up for the challenge, and so are you. You were up for this challenge. And I understand that it's a new technology. I personally think that blockchain, Bitcoin, Ethereum, it's incredibly exciting. It's going to be high growth. We're already seeing countries digitize their currency and have digital wallet options. But the very same concerns that you have are the very same concerns that you have overcome to be here, to be speaking with us today, about to defend your PhD. And so my suggestion is that you, and I'm sure you know other women like you, tell your story and make yourself visible so that people understand that you are out there. You are up for this challenge and they can draw inspiration from that. I hear that maybe there's a women in blockchain in the UAE society coming, and maybe you should think about starting it. I mean, there's just so many things that you can do with your own personal power. Don't ever underestimate how inspiring you are and the difference that you can make to those around you.
Yeah, Alia, I mean, now
Yeah.
I've been inspired to start, learning more about blockchain. So so I think that all of your points, both Aisha and Alia, are really, really relevant. And it is amazing how powerful a simple story can be in helping change people's mindsets and overcome their fears or their concerns or what other people are telling them about how hard something is going to be. So thank you for that wonderful discussion. I would like to ask Wafa Hamza's question that's here in the chat box. Wafa asks, how might we encourage more industries to consider the long-term implications of gender messaging?
So excellent question. I think that most of the time when I talk to business leaders, I do it from the perspective of data. And so I would encourage, if you, and I'm assuming that you've probably already begun the literature survey, but there's a lot of really good research that I've seen in the United States, mostly from leading institutions, and I'm sure that you have comparable institutions in the UAE, that talk about how simple changes in messaging, whether it's the inclusion of women in a commercial or showing young women and girls as figures in role models and engineers and things of that nature, all of the stuff leads to long-term change. Because there's a very basic principle that says it is difficult for someone to emulate success that they cannot define. But for companies, many of whom are driven by profit, margin, business things, they often need to see the data, which is that having positive gender representation not only diversifies your organization, but allows you to increase your revenue as well as your market share, to the real-time effects of having a more inviting and inclusive workplace. Because oftentimes the positive portrayals of women as well as minorities or other individuals not only benefit the group that was targeted, but it benefits the whole because you have a better, more welcoming environment. And so I'll circle back to say that I often start the conversation with data and then test that data in real life. And so if it's possible to have a pilot program at any of these organizations where you can just try out some of the messaging and actually test the impact of that messaging, I would also recommend that you consider that, or at least socializing that. So for me, and this is a very my life example, I was one of a few minority females who were hired into my area at the time. And we were sort of part of a, I don't want to call it an experiment, so we'll just call it a pilot, as to whether or not this will work. Well, not only did it work, it actually ended up leading to an increase of representation of women in my area. And it caused people to think differently about who needed to be at the decision-making table, because we understood that as a society, we benefited from having more people as part of that process.
Yeah, what I hear you saying as well, Aisha, is basically speaking the language of those businesses. So I think those are wonderful ideas. We have another question here from Rashid Al-Mazrui, and Rashid asks, have you worked with a group of male students, such as your senior design, such when you were doing your senior design, and faced problems since you were the only woman in the group? And if yes, what challenge did you face in teamwork specifically?
Yeah, so I've had some group experiences that I learned a lot from. I don't consider them to be negative experiences. I consider them to be learning experiences, because oftentimes in life, we learn more from the things that don't go the way we would have liked them to go than from things that do. And what I learned early on was that when I was in these groups, in college especially, I may not have felt heard. I may not have felt welcomed. I may not have seen my ideas be part of the final process. But that taught me how to become better. That taught me how to improve my argument. There's a saying that I really like, which is, don't elevate your voice, improve your argument. And understand oftentimes that the perceived obstacles are there in order to make you better. And so as I started to mature along my career, I found a way where if my ideas were not being welcomed by those who were immediately around me, I could still find ways to get my ideas out and express what it was that I had to say. It's not always that your idea will be heard within the group. And I really want to extend this beyond just being a woman and being in technology. We see this oftentimes in politics. We see this even in family processes. I may go to a family event and I may want to have a certain dessert, or I may want to go to a certain ride on the theme park. And it may be a really good idea, but I may be overruled because the rest of the group wants to go on to a different ride or to a different restaurant or to a different place. And so I think it's important to, one, validate yourself first, understand when you do and when you do not have a good idea, and then also understand when you can improve that idea and that there are many ways that you can get your ideas out. It's not that you often, like, you don't always have to get the idea out when you're working with that student group. There are other ways that you can express your idea. It could be to a professor, it could be to someone else in university, it could be to another person in your class. But there are many ways within which you can make sure that your idea is heard and considered.
Thanks so much for that answer, Aisha. And I can see that we're coming down low on time. This has been a wonderful discussion so far, and I'd like to give Irshad the chance to ask our last question now.
Hi, I'm Irshad Ahmed, Associate Professor of Chemistry at the American University of Ras Al Khaimah. So first of all, Aisha, congratulations on your outstanding contribution for the scientific society and all your success. So, well, the few days before, I was just explaining to my two kids, they are 8 and 10 years, and most of the time they have like a conflict between them, right? And both have the same gender. So I was just telling them, if you will work together, it's like a 1 + 1, 2. And if both you will stand like this, like 11, and if you will fight with each other, 1 - 1, that would be 0. So what you will prefer, right? So my understanding here, if both the genders, male and female, if they will 1 - 1, 0, 1 + 1, 2, and if they will work together, 1 means like 11, of course, they could achieve a lot, right? And of course, I'm doing in the same fashion because my spouse, she's also an associate professor of the chemistry. She's a PhD and of course, a good researcher as well. So I could understand, but what is your, the perspective here, how these two genders can work together and achieve a maximum, means the most? What would you like to say here with your own experience to the audience, please?
I would like to say that I believe you're spot on. The greatest mentors I've had in my life have not been women. That doesn't mean that I don't have great women mentors, but I've really had a lot of success from people who were not like me, stepping up to the plate and bringing their ideas. Whether it was at the start of my career, whether it was founding this company, whether it was deciding to create product and needing financing so that I could scale the company and deliver thousands of boxes. All of these were initiatives that came from men who had power, who understood that my ideas were valuable and knew how to navigate and were willing to share that knowledge with me. And so I always like to bring the message of partnership, of collaboration, of understanding, that this is two parts to a greater story. Both sides complement each other, and the benefits of working together are so great that I'm willing to spend my time and expose my family life and my journey as an engineer so that people can learn from that. And for the women, if there's one thing I want to leave you all with today, is to believe in yourself. You can and you will, to allow your voice to be heard and to validate your ideas so that when you have these opportunities, when there are people who are willing to join with you and to make you the 11, that you're in a position where you can take advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you so much, Aisha, for those really inspiring last words. And they're, I think, really a great way to lead into in closing this session in the U.S. mission's goal in our engagement with the United Arab Emirates is to also create that 1 + 1 = 2, or that 11 even, as we continue to engage with all of the institutions represented here to expand the ties between the U.S. and the United Arab Emirates. Our education partnership with the UAE is extremely important for regional stability and economic development, and preparing our youth for the careers of the future. And so we really appreciate, Aisha, your words and how to and advice on how to inspire women to pursue STEM careers, and the wonderful questions and comments and discussion from the audience today. And I just want to offer that the U.S. Embassy is always available to any of you who have ideas for how to expand our institutional ties. And I want to just thank you once again, Aisha, for your time today. And so with that, I think we can go ahead and close the session.
Thank you. You all have a wonderful evening.